Imagine fighting a system designed to protect you, but instead you're battling that same system for your own protection. For over 3 years, I faced relentless harassment, discrimination and isolation, all while dealing with a disability, at the hands of the Department of Work and Pensions when I worked there. They said I misrepresented the truth. They ignored my cries for reasonable adjustments, but I didn't back down. This is what they don't tell you when you work for them. Standing up for yourself can cost you everything, but your dignity, that's worth fighting for. They tried to break me in every way, in their way. But I'm still here. They tried to stop me again and again and again, ignoring me, thinking I would just go away, that their failures would just go away. But I'm still standing. The result isn't the end. It's just part of the story. And I hope my story is a landmark for all. My own personal case highlights important issues around equality and the rights of disabled people. Remember, standing up for yourself is essential, even when you know the odds are stacked against you. This channel is dedicated to exposing injustice and empowering others to stand up for their rights, just like I did. In today's episode, I want to share the initial battle, my personal battle that I had against the Department of Work and Pensions, where I faced disability discrimination and wrongful termination after speaking up. On Friday the 13th of September 2024, the court ruled in my favour for unlawful harassment from the Department of Work and Pensions and their failure to make reasonable adjustments required for my disability. You might be asking, how is it that a government department whose sole objective is to look after people's health and well-being could have so seriously lacked in protecting and looking after their own disabled employees? Well, episode 1 is where this story begins. And the episodes after will show you the twisting tales they told, in an attempt to cover up the things they failed to do. I entered the Department of Work and Pensions under their Disability Confidence Scheme following a car crash I had in 2017. I made this very clear to them on my application form before joining, in the trial period, and I made numerous requests for reasonable adjustments. Despite requesting this a number of times, I eventually had to raise a grievance because nobody was listening to me. As we can see from the restricted and internal investigation, which was part of my grievance, I was being left alone to deal with very explicit and difficult things, such as dealing with suicides and all sorts of other high-risk situations where I should have been accompanied by other employees, but they were deciding not to assist me. They were deciding to be very indirectly confrontational, hoping that I would fail if they just did not support me. And this was all because I had raised a grievance against the team leader. I've had to remove the name of the team leader in this publication because the team leader has actually been involved in relationships outside of their marriage in the office, and they are scared that if their name is published, then it could potentially affect their divorce. So that's why their name has been removed, and it was a request that the judge granted. As you can see at the very top there, the investigator stated that the Department of Work and Pensions does have clear guidance for line managers to follow when recruiting somebody with a disability, and this was clearly not followed in my case. He also stated that my line manager would have had a copy of the report clearly telling them and informing them of my disability. This is in addition to me doing so as well, and that should have been the place where they should have started talking to me about putting in reasonable adjustments so that I was not injured or became ill at work. And of course, this did not happen. What then started to unfold in the office where I was working was behaviour that could only be interpreted as bullying. I was being called out for things I hadn't done. I was being excluded from anything that would be nice, work meals, work drinks, even duties. And the final straw came to it when I injured my leg even more. When we had a room change, as it clearly says there, floor 2 was closed in December due to a lack of security staff. This was not a one-off incident. It happened at least 2 to 3 times a week. And when that happened, I would have to collect every single piece of IT equipment I had, my bag, my coat, my walking stick, my flask, everything, and move. On this particular day, I had to go through 2 different floors with about 100 work desks on each floor, and every single able-bodied civil servant working in the Department of Work and Pensions all denied me a desk. That's right, I was denied a desk to sit down whilst I was clearly struggling with my walking stick. It was at this point that I did actually then injure my knee. My knee gave way and I had very other issues. I twisted the bottom of my back because I fell over. And I just obviously went home feeling very humiliated, not understanding at all what was happening, why people were behaving like this, because at that time I was not aware that the rest of the staff knew that I had raised a grievance, but clearly it would appear they had been informed of that fact. Again, all of these things contravene their own policies and procedures, but this seems to be a habit. Then going back to the initial report, as you can see, the investigator stated that I had been treated unfairly in incidences 6, 10 and 12, and the majority of the other incidences, which all related to bullying and bullying behaviour, was it was determined that at the time they felt there wasn't enough evidence to ascertain whether that was really happening or wasn't happening. Again, a common theme in the Department of Work and Pensions. Things went from bad to worse, and in April 2022, I was diagnosed with a mental health condition, PTSD, stress, and anxiety. I was a GAD-7 level of depression, which was quite severe, and it was all because of how I was being treated as an employee at the Department of Work and Pensions. In my opinion, lots of different strategies were being employed by the Department of Work and Pensions to try and make me crack. There's no other way to put it. I was overloaded with work and then had work taken away from me. Half of the time I was treated incapable, or I was treated as the expert. I am actually a self-employment specialist. I'm an expert in it, and it's something I was doing in my own right before I even joined the Department of Work and Pensions. A few months after being diagnosed with a mental health condition, I actually trained all of the work coaches and the team leaders across my district and a number of different offices on new processes that they needed to employ in the Department of Work and Pensions for claimants who were disabled or had long-term health conditions and were self-employed. And one of these reasons was because in some cases these universal credit claimants were not having the right tapering applied to their claim in regards to the Equality Act of 2010. And this ruffled a lot of feathers when I was correcting and looking at different claims and the processes being employed by team leaders and work coaches. But the law's the law, right? Or indeed, that's what I thought. Leading up to my dismissal from the Department of Work and Pensions, the lever that they attempted to use that was that I hadn't been doing things at all correctly. I would like you at this point to note the timestamps on emails because they are very relevant in the episodes that unfold and the incidences that I'm going to be referring to in this one. This is in actual fact an email from the head of self-employment at the time, and as you can see, she has clearly stated in the middle of this email. In particular, I would like to recognise Alison McRobbie for the exceptional work you've done following the implementation of the new process and the support you have provided to the leadership team, your self-employed colleagues and your customers. And as we can see there, she is clearly telling them that if I have asked them to attend some training, they will be contacted by me, and they will have to attend a meeting if they need a little bit of an upskilling to help them process these self-employment claims correctly. Now, one of the reasons why I have decided to do this on the Justice Journals is that I have found, in a bid to have my disability respected and my integrity reserved because of my disability, even during the court case, I was curtailed by the judge and I was silenced in a number of different strategies being employed, I believe, at different times between the judge and the barrister and the legal team of the Department of Work and Pensions. We had all sorts of anomalies, like giving me 4.5 minutes to cross-examine witnesses, to miraculous PDF documents which were meant to constitute some kind of evidence from the Department of Work and Pensions being admitted in the middle of a court case, which quite frankly you could have done at home on any computer. So I have high questions over the integrity of the evidence that was actually provided by the Department of Work and Pensions, and that is why I feel so strongly about publishing my evidence here for the whole world to see. Now we're going to go back to the email that we were looking at, and I want you all to note the date. It is the 18th of July 2022. Nearly 1 year later, I am still asking for reasonable adjustments. I had been moved every single time I raised a grievance about my reasonable adjustment not being done at all, not being processed. I was moved team as if I'd done something wrong. I do actually have adjustment disorder, so continuously moving me from team to team, giving me different workloads, different caseloads, different clients, all the different, every single day was incredibly destabilizing given the diagnosis that I had given to the Department of Work and Pensions. So this was 155% very, very unhelpful and did not support me at all. In the court papers, in the tribunal, the employment tribunal, I had to listen to a number of the team leaders from the Department of Work and Pensions state that I refused occupational health referrals. In actual fact, I had one immediately after I was diagnosed with PTSD, and the Department of Work and Pensions chose to ignore the majority of the suggestions that were made then. I ask for it again in 2023, as we can see in this email here. Now, it's quite obvious that at this point I had very little trust in most of the team leaders. They definitely seem to be conspiring against me, and we will see in later episodes that under a subject data access request that was indeed what was happening. So in hindsight, I should have just followed my gut feeling. Here I am asking again. I kindly request your support in postponing the meeting until we have received the occupational health report and until my reasonable adjustments, including the remote working transfer request, I have been given the necessary consideration. You can clearly see there that I have stated I'm concerned about the Department of Work and Pensions bypassing processes that are actually governed by government policy and the Equality Act of 2010. Thankfully, I did win some of those, and although I felt they put me at a severe disadvantage, the judge in my employment tribunal case seems to think that they didn't. So, not giving a disabled employee reasonable adjustments, which in my case was trigger points, which I'll go into at another stage, another episode, did not put me at an unfair disadvantage, which is a point I contest deeply. I also ask in this email dated 2023, so this is over a year since I have been working for the Department of Work and Pensions, why I still do not have the reasonable adjustments that I originally requested in December 2021 and 2022, and why several team leaders are ignoring me. And yet again, I was ignored. And this seems to be a current theme in the Department of Work and Pensions. They say to us that they're going to help us because we're disabled, that they're going to respect the Equality Act, that they're going to do this, they're going to do that. Well, they didn't do a single thing. Now, my concern as well is if they can't even do this for a disabled employee, why on earth is the Department of Work and Pensions being entrusted to look after disabled people who aren't at work, people who are on benefits, people who are reliant on some kind of help? I honestly thought that I was going to get some help. I thought it had been so long. I thought they're definitely going to help me now. I'm being very assertive. I'm putting everything in writing. But no. The Department of Work and Pensions then deployed this strategy to cover up their failure to make reasonable adjustments for me, a disabled person, in their workplace. And this is what happened next. So not even a month after I write to the team leader, who we're just going to call Melanie at this point, not even a month had passed since the email which you have just seen about me requesting reasonable adjustments and asking why they haven't been done, and also calling this team leader out on their fault in process under occupational health referral. So for people wanting to know, when you're referred by your employer to occupational health, it's meant to be a supportive process, and as part of that process, that employer or the manager or the team leader is meant to have a discussion with the disabled person to see how they can best get the best support and advice for them from the occupational health therapist. That didn't happen. There was no conversation, nothing at all. And when I went to that occupational health meeting with the therapist, the questions I was being asked were to determine whether or not I had a disability, not how they were going to support me. And then I see this message here in the bundle in the court documents. The same team leader who had failed to make reasonable adjustments after two other team leaders in the same office then referred me to internal fraud, stating that, well, let's read it. Alison has been working from home since 2021 and is going through the return to the workplace process. That is actually incorrect. I had asked to move departments, move my job. I clearly stated I could not return to the workplace there because of the bullying and the harassment. And again, that was ignored, as we can clearly see written here in this email a few weeks after I raised concerns about their failures again by the same team leader. Please may I draw your attention to incident number 17. Alison has a profile on social media as a content coach. She is a published author and creator of the MAM method and has written books to help start, develop and grow businesses, as quoted on her Amazon profile. I am concerned at the accesses displayed throughout this report being predominantly with self-employed customers. Now, let's just break this down a little bit. Firstly, I would really have loved to have known at this point, how on earth has a manager who I've only spoken to on 2 occasions managed to grasp so much personal information about me, about my private life? There are very strict policies as a civil servant on information you can go looking at. You certainly can't look up people outside of your caseload, and you certainly cannot go looking up employees and rooting around in things like this. But let's have a look at the MAM method. This is indeed a book I've written. I've written over 100 books. I am an award-winning author, and I've been an Amazon bestseller twice. This is before I started working for the Department of Work and Pensions, because I am a specialist, as I said, of self-employment, building brands, digital enterprising, and all sorts of other things along those realms. This is the book, The MAM Method by Alison McRobbie, myself. As you can see, this book was in print, but I took it out of print. I think it's a day before I started working for the Department of Work and Pensions. And the reason for that is because there is an entire chapter in this book about the very useful policies that you can refer to in the self-employment niche when you're starting a business on benefits, particularly people with disabilities or people or single parents. I've been a single parent myself. The main point here is that this book was out of print, both digitally and on paperback for like 2 years, nearly 3 years before this team leader wrote an email. How can a book that is not even in print and hasn't sold hundreds or thousands be any kind of a risk to anybody, most of all given the topic? Start your own business with just £100, I think it is, or £99. In actual fact, part of this book is my own personal story on how I started my first business as, quite frankly, a broke-ass single parent. And that is my story, telling how I did it, what I did, the tools I used, basically the things you need to do to start a business on a low income. Now, when I cross-examined this team leader, I asked the question in court, can you please explain to the court how a book that is not even in print, is not even published in any way, shape, sense or form, digitally, on paper or anything, be a risk to anybody? One, because it's not published, and secondly, I'm not talking about making a bomb, am I? I'm talking about my own personal story about how I started my self-employment. Had this have been a risque subject or something highly not okay, as such, what I've just referred to, then I would understand a level of concern. So I was reported to internal fraud for a book that's not even in print by a manager at the Department of Work and Pensions. Now, in order to have found this book, this person would have to have gone looking for it on Amazon, because clearly, if it's not in print, it's not going to populate very easily. And in actual fact, if you look at the book, and this is my own evidence, as you can see, the claimant's evidence, you can see it's not even available. So at the time that this team leader reported me to internal fraud at the Department of Work and Pensions, she did it with full knowledge, knowing that this book is not even in print, because it clearly says it's not available. If it's not available, and as we can see from my author's dashboard from Amazon, she could not have had a copy. Nobody could have had a copy because it wasn't in print. Now, instead of the Department of Work and Pensions perhaps sending this silly woman on her way and maybe asking themselves, why has she gone out of her way to try and cause a very trifled issue and try and find fault with a disabled employee on something that is quite frankly ridiculous? No, they didn't do that. And when I was in court, I also asked this team leader this question. You've been unable to tell the court why a book on self-employment explaining my life story was a big issue for anybody at all, in any way, shape, sense or form. Most notably because it's not in print. Here's a book that is in print, and this is about teaching English teachers how to become self-employed, because I have a language school. This is in print, but this wasn't a problem. And I've also had English teachers and parents and all sorts of different people be on my caseload before. So why would a book that's not even in print be a problem? And I've got others of the same. I was met with no answer. I was interjected by the judge, and the judge said, I think you've asked all the questions you need to ask, and I think the witness has answered all of the questions that they need to answer. But I disagree. I think if the Department of Work and Pensions can take honest, truthful evidence and honest, truthful, non-concerning pieces of literature or actions and twist it to be something that it isn't, I think all of the questions need to be asked, and I think all of those questions need to be answered. But really, this isn't about self-employment. This is not about what books I've written, what books I haven't written. It isn't about any of that, is it? It's about this. It's about the Department of Work and Pensions failing to make reasonable adjustments, and instead of taking responsibility for their actions and admitting that they have failed to do this and put it right, as they are legally obliged to do under the Equality Act of 2010, instead of doing that, they try and find fault with a disabled person where there was no fault to find. And the more I talk to other people, to other former civil servants, people who've worked at the Department of Work and Pensions, the more I talk to claimants who have benefits from the Department of Work and Pensions, I see the mistreatment, the harassment, the bullying, and the blatant failure to make reasonable adjustments from the Department of Work and Pensions. It's not just me, it's nationwide. It is nationwide. A department that was set up to support and help disabled people think they can silence us when they make their errors. We will not be silenced. Disabled people have a voice, and the Justice Journals is going to make sure that their voices, just like mine, are heard.